I feel like it's important to note that for those that would doubt the feasibility of, people just kind of investing in these new systems, they can look at all the coins in the status quo because that's functionally what they are now, right? Like, for every Lambo that's being subsidized by people buying into this currency that fundamentally has baked into it a certain vision for a new future, right? And that's just one of many currencies with very large market caps, right? So where do these market caps come from? Whether or not someone's speculating or investing or just trying to make their own money because it's hype, these are all people that are fundamentally, at like in a literal sense, being onboarded to a system that represents a lot of the values you're speaking to, right? And so the next step, and maybe that's in part why we're in such an in-between phase. It's like the next step is right there, which is like, all right, instead of subsidizing Lambos, let's subsidize public goods. Let's subsidize things that allow us all to have better lives and coordinate better and have better civic systems, right? Which maybe is a good point to get into, like, what are you up to there with Open Civics?
Yeah. Yeah, and just to your point, I've been really, rest in peace, Public Goods Network. That was like a very interesting experiment where they were taking the gas fees and dripping them directly to public goods. There's another project from Geoweb that has like a live real-time quadratic funding drip to a number of organizations that are building public goods. Optimism is really showing up as like a leader in the layer 2 space, and again, and bringing a amazing innovation of how those funds are distributed, that combines like the wisdom of the crowd of quadratic funding with also kind of delegated authority of experts. So I think the Web3 space is really leading the way. These are the things that governments should be doing. This is like what a government should be, but instead we have governments that are just protecting the rights of capital and funneling our tax-paying dollars that could be going to education and environmental protections and restoring our waterways and rebuilding our soil, and it's going to fund, wars and genocides, and so this is how we take back our systems is through Web3. There's definitely this kind of underground, like, anarchist part of me that's like, we don't need their permission to create these alternatives. If we make the alternative and it's better, then we don't need to like elect someone into office to go change those systems. There are certain things in the civic space, particularly, that are huge investments. The things that you traditionally think of with civics, roads and bridges and energy and these kind of massive infrastructural projects that are hard to do, of like a community of 1,000 people pooling some resource into a multi-sig. Like, you can't really build a bridge like that. It does take a larger scale coordination. But when I think of civic systems, I primarily think of local community organizations meeting their own needs together. So like, how can we use Web3 or community currencies to better connect local small scale farmers and consumers in an area? How can we use Web3 to empower a new kind of either unions or worker ownership of businesses? And those are still in the civic space, but it's about really localizing the function of government to the place where you actually have a real relationship with other humans. And that to me is what is like, I used to be a really traditional Democrat, and I used to think that government spending and government programs were like the best way for us to alleviate or fix some of the big social problems that we face. And the more I actually worked in those spaces, I worked at a food bank for a year, and I saw how the food aid that was being given out by the government, one, it was filled with high fructose corn syrup. So it was actually giving people chronic illness, the free food that the government was giving them. And two, it turned the people who were receiving this aid into just numbers on a sheet. and there was no human connection whatsoever. And I think mutual aid is actually like the humanistic element of what civic service is all about. It's about showing up to care for our community members because they're our community members and we know them. And so there's a lot of like deep social rehabilitation that needs to be done. So it's not just about creating new tools, it's about how do those tools improve our the intimacy that we have to the people in our own communities. And so, you know, these tools are basically just training wheels to re-entrain us how to be good neighbors again, how to actually show up outside of our isolated kind of suburban, you know, single family homes and actually, you know, start to take responsibility for caring for our environment and the people around us.